The end of October had come and Harry had somewhat settled into his routine. He did his best not to stand out for more than just being Harry Potter, and since his two acquaintances were both doing amazing, he was able to hide in their shadows and make it look like his own above-average abilities were due to their association. Neither was happy with that, but after Harry begged them on his knees not to let anyone know he was the smart one, they agreed not to tell others. So far there had only been one incident which threw off Harry's image of a just-above-average student with help, and that was their first flying class. Harry got the worst broom, and once Harry mounted the thing, it shot up into the air and broke in half, leaving Harry to fall 30 feet from the sky. This wasn't the problem was that Harry did a shoulder roll on landing and got up without a single visible or measurable injury. If it was another student it would be talked about for a week and forgotten, but as Harry Potter, it was something that simply added to his immortalized legend. Today was the day that the student delegations of Beauxbatons and Durmstrang would arrive at Hogwarts. It was a Saturday, and although most would rather be playing indoors or in some cases, Hermione, doing their homework or studying, every student was made to stand out in the frigid cold and wait until the other schools showed up to show school-wide unity. "Weasley, straighten your hat, Miss Poddle, take that ridiculous thing out of your hair," cried McGonagall as she went row by row to confirm the uniformity of the students. Once ready, she said, "Follow me please, first years out in front, and lead everyone to the Black Lake." After waiting for a while, Dumbledore said aloud that Beauxbatons had arrived and pointed up. Harry saw what appeared to be a dozen elephant-sized winged horses pulling an enormous carriage. A few of the students unconsciously backed up when the carriage descended for a landing, and the whole group felt the impact of the hoofbeats of the creature's landing. A moment after the carriage came to a halt, a young man came out and opened a set of golden stairs. Dumbledore approached and met the woman who came out and exchanged pleasantries. What surprised most was that she was even taller than Hagrid. A series of young women in powder blue robes left the carriage with an attempted show of grace that was difficult to pull off successfully, with each and every one of them shivering to the bone. Dumbledore had a teacher escort the lot into the castle before they all froze solid, and everyone else continued to wait for Durmstrang to show up. Not wanting to be shown up, it seemed, the Durmstrang delegation showed up in a giant ship which ascended from beneath the surface of the Black Lake, leaving everyone to wonder how it got there in the first place. The students of Durmstrang and their headmaster, who looked like a stereotypical evil warlock, all wore furs and looked far less fragile than their Beauxbatons counterparts. Harry heard the redhead standing a few places down from him. "Hey, that's Krum." According to a magazine in Harry's inventory, Victor Krum was a student of Durmstrang, yet a professional Quidditch player, one of the best in the world even. He would be in his 7th year, and his skill was expected to lead his team to the World Cup once he graduated. Shame his team had no one else to rely on. With their arrival, the whole group returned to the castle into the warmth of the Great Hall. The Durmstrang students chose to sit at the Slytherin table while the Beauxbatons chose to sit with the Ravenclaws. The headmaster introduced his fellow headmasters and told everyone the choosing of the champions would begin after the feast. The food that appeared had a larger variety than normal, which some of the cookbooks in Harry's inventory named as French dishes. Harry himself was watching the new students and checking out their exotic energy. Although there was no level floating above each person's head, the size and brightness of the exotic energy mass within each gave Harry an idea for their magic stats and magic path rank. From Beauxbatons, the strongest contender seemed to be a blonde young woman whose magic seemed more a part of her than normal. This was something he usually only saw in magical creatures. The strongest from Durmstrang was unsurprisingly Victor Krum, and not by a small margin either. Though if that meant he was good or everyone else from his school was bad, Harry did not know. There were a few possible contenders for Hogwarts, but the strongest sat at the Hufflepuff table. Harry would say he was level 50 with a magic path rank of 9. Harry's own stats after 2 months of school were as follows. Harry Potter level 77, age 11, STR 68, AGI 112, INT 250, WS 250, LUK 20, warrior path rank 8, scholar path rank 11, magic path rank 15, tech path 7. Harry meditated daily to level up at least once a day and extra on weekends while practicing combat, both magical and non-magical, against the monsters he faced. Teaching Neville and Hermione while studying himself got his scholar path up an impressive amount, and last month Harry finally came up with a rune scheme that protected electronics from exotic energy. It basically used an ordered set of exotic energy and froze it in place around the electronics, forming something of a shield. The frozen shield wouldn't enter the fragile parts and would stop additional exotic energy up to a certain strength from entering. It wouldn't survive anything stronger than a weak spell, but would at least not get fried just from ambient energy. Once that was done, Harry added to his routine more time to study computers and electronics. At a few points Harry had to sneak out of Hogwarts to apparate to London and buy some more electronics, but he hadn't been caught so far, which was a win for him and let him advance his tech path as well. Harry waited until the feast was over to see how the tournament participants would be selected so he could ponder on how he would be entered. Two men entered the Great Hall and Dumbledore said, "Let me introduce, for those who do not know them, Mr. Bartemius Crouch, head of the Department of International Magical Cooperation, and Mr. Ludo Bagman, head of the Department of Magical Games and Sports. They will be joining myself along with Professor Karkaroff and Madame Maxime as the judges for the tournament." Mr. Filch, the strange nearly magicless man, came in with a jewel-encrusted chest and placed it before Dumbledore. Dumbledore gave a few more foreboding warnings before tapping the chest 3 times and opened it to reveal a rather large silver cup. He explained that it was called the Goblet of Fire and would be the impartial judge. He would take it to the entrance hall and draw an age line around it that would prevent any under the age of 17 from approaching it. Once there, he would light it and any who felt themselves up to the challenge would have to write their name on a piece of paper and place it in the goblet. The next day, the goblet would choose 3 names, one of each school, to be contenders for the Triwizard Cup. Once the feast was over, Harry, Hermione, Neville and the still as of yet to be named redhead went to the dorm. The redhead asked, "Harry, are you going to enter your name in it?" Harry shrugged, "Nope, doubt it matters. The goblet will likely spit out my name regardless." Neville said, "Oh yeah, didn't you bet Hermione you'd be entered to compete against your will?" Hermione said, "There is no way you're going to complete. What if Snape or some 7th year enters my name?" Hermione said, "Even if they did, there is no way the goblet would choose a 1st year when 7th years." Her complaint about Harry's lack of skill compared to a 7th year died down when she realized she had no actual idea where Harry's skill level was at. Anyone else and there was no second thought about it. Harry Potter on the other hand. The redhead spoke up, "Do you guys hear that?" Harry didn't hear anything, so he paused and turned the background sound up on the menu. Once he unpaused, the sound of massive footsteps echoed from around the corner down the hall. Everyone turned around to go back down the hallway, but the stairs leading up to the hallway decided not to cooperate and twisted away, leading no way to go but forward. A large green monster with a stupid-looking face and a massive wooden club turned the corner and locked eyes with the 4 students. Yup, it was a troll. Harry hadn't fought a troll before, but his racing heartbeat was quickly quelled by the passive mental ability of his gamer power. The others were not so lucky. The redhead started muttering in circles, Hermione was hyperventilating, and Neville was frozen solid. Harry paused the world and walked over to the troll to examine him. The reach of his club would prevent anyone from running past him, and Harry really didn't feel like dying today. Harry returned back to the end of the hall where the stairs had left him and came up with an idea. Harry confirmed the distance and measured it a few times before going over the plan a few more times to be sure. When he was ready, he unpaused and was returned back to his original position. Harry grabbed Neville and the redhead by the robes and said, "Hermione, follow me now, no questions," and dragged them both back to where the stairs were. Hermione was the type to overthink rather than freeze, so she easily adjusted and followed Harry back. The hallway met the stairs at a balcony with a rail that extended further left and right than the hallway, out of sight of the troll. Harry shoved Neville and the redhead into one side and pointed to the other side and told Hermione, "Stay there, don't move, I have a plan, it will work, don't move." Hermione tucked herself into the corner and Harry returned to the hallway where the long strides of the troll had it almost to their position. Harry stood before the troll who swung its club, and Harry paused again to go back and confirm that Hermione wasn't peeking. Luckily she was still crouched down in the corner and Neville had passed out and the redhead seemed to have his eyes shut. Harry unpaused and ducked under the swing before he slipped under the troll's legs. He then cast a slippery jinx on the troll's skin, which caused the ungraceful monster's legs to slip out from its own weight. Lastly, Harry used an overpowered knockback jinx to send the troll down what might as well have been a frictionless hall due to the slippery jinx, where the troll sailed off the stairless deck and down the tower 4 full flights before landing on the bottom. Harry walked over to the edge and peered down at the fallen monster. The creature's exotic energy was circulating around its body, meaning it wasn't dead, but likely wouldn't get up soon. When Harry went back over to Hermione, she reached out and hugged him. The redhead seemed to have seen the troll fly off the balcony and said, "Blimey Harry, what did you do?" Harry shrugged and said, "Slippery jinx and knockback jinx. Made the troll slip and knocked him back. Gravity took care of the rest." Hermione said, "Harry, that was brilliant." He argued back, "Lucky is more like it. Had we been trapped on the 1st floor, that wouldn't have gone so well." Neville got up and said, "What happened?" Hermione looked hesitant to answer before the redhead said, "Harry defeated the troll." Neville's eyes shot up and he exclaimed, "What? That was real. Where is it?" The redhead pointed down the tower where several students and a teacher had now approached the troll, which still wasn't moving. Hermione said, "We should get a teacher." Harry sighed in defeat but didn't argue. 10 minutes later Harry had told everyone what had happened several times. The knockback jinx wouldn't be taught for a few more months but was still considered a first-year spell, while the slippery jinx wasn't taught at all but was around the level of a first-year spell. That being said, the slippery jinx was normally something that targeted the hand, which caused the target's wand to slip from their grip. Casting in a way where the friction of the entire surface of a troll was removed was far beyond the norm. And the knockback jinx was little more than a very hard push and was less effective the heavier something was. The weight of a fully grown mountain troll should have barely budged with such a spell, frictionless surface or not. Luckily for Harry, Snape was there and more than happy to downplay Harry's achievements as luck, which Harry had no complaints about. Still, before the next morning there was not a single person within the castle who did not know of Harry's single-handed defeat of the troll. Breakfast time included rumors being passed back and forth about who entered their names in the goblet and tales of Harry's epic battle with the troll where he punched it through a wall and sent it flying to the other side of the castle. Harry himself found each retelling more outlandish than the last. What was the point of using first-year spells if people weren't going to bother recalling the details? Should he use Fiend Fire next time? Harry went around the entrance hall so he wouldn't be seen in the same room as the goblet. Some part of him figured if he actually entered his name, the goblet would probably select him as Hogwarts champion. But what if the quest was like a self-fulfilling prophecy where if he didn't hear it, he wouldn't have entered himself thinking he was already destined for it and wouldn't have had to complete? Slightly crazy perhaps, but he still wanted to avoid purposefully entering himself so he could see how his name would come out anyways. This year, Halloween was on a Sunday, and while some students had plans that revolved around sitting in front of a cup all day, Harry actually intended on being productive. Along with Hermione, Harry spent the next several hours in the library. He would look for an interesting book, place it in his inventory and pause, and take as long to go over it as he wanted. The fun part was that he could even look through the restricted section. Each of those books had a spell where should the book be opened by someone without a special permission slip, the book would literally start screaming. However, since books needed to be moved every once in a while, simply taking them off the shelf didn't do anything as long as they were off the shelf too long. This system certainly never took into account an ability to read a book without opening the cover in less than a second. Harry couldn't go to the restricted section often or he'd get caught, but when no one was around he'd walk over to it, remove a book, place it in his inventory, pause, go over it completely, then unpause, remove it and set it back. With practice the book was only off the shelf for 2 seconds. Thanks to his scholar path reaching rank 11, Harry could read and cross-reference material far more thoroughly than he used to be able to. Harry figured he'd have all the unique and important books memorized by February. Once the time for the Halloween feast got close, Harry and Hermione both returned to the Great Hall to watch the selection for the tournament. Hermione saw that Harry was eating with the zen-like acceptance of a death row convict having his last meal and said, "Harry, you are not going to be chosen, all right?" Harry spoke up, "Oh ye of little faith. I thought after yesterday you would stop doubting my talent as a trouble magnet. Just because I'm a first year and I didn't go anywhere near the goblet doesn't mean my name won't come out." Neither Harry or Hermione were whispering, and Harry heard a few Gryffindors seem to whisper back to back and what seemed to be bets being made. The redhead said, "My brothers tried getting past the age line with an aging potion but it shot them back and they both grew a beard." Harry said, "One of them should keep it so we can tell them apart." The redhead responded, "Nah, even if they did, they'd probably figure out how to switch the beard just to make everyone mistake one for the other." Harry could see the twins doing that. The goblet had been moved to a stand in front of the headmaster's table and the students of both visiting schools entered the hall and waited to the side. Once the feast ended, Dumbledore stood up and said, "Well, the goblet is almost ready to make its decision. I estimate that it requires 1 more minute. Now, when the champions' names are called, I would ask them to please come up to the top of the hall, walk along the staff table, and go through into the next chamber where they will be receiving their first instructions." The headmaster waved his wand around, which lowered the brightness of the candles. The goblet of fire was the brightest flame in the hall. After a moment, the flame spit out a paper which Dumbledore caught and named the Durmstrang champion as Victor Krum, to no one's surprise. The next paper that shot out named the Beauxbatons champion Fleur Delacour, the young blonde Harry noticed earlier. When the last paper shot out, a collective breath was held by the entire hall. The Hogwarts champion is Cedric Diggory. While the entire hall turned to uproar, Hermione turned to Harry and gave a silent, knowing, and slightly smug smile. Harry noticed several of the Gryffindors glance at Harry with a bit of an edge. There had in fact been bets placed on him. Harry however noticed the fire hadn't gone out yet. He turned to face Hermione and waggled a finger back and forth signifying, not yet. Dumbledore had already started his speech about giving the 3 champions support and his honest hopes for the tournament. He never got to finish his speech as the goblet of fire roared to life once more and spat out a 4th slip of paper before finally going out. Hermione immediately turned to face Harry, who gave her an "I told you so" smile. Harry himself felt the exotic energy of the cup attach itself to him in the same moment. Ping. Goblet of Fire contract perk acquired. Conditions: must compete in the 3 tasks of the tournament. Failure to complete conditions will change Goblet of Fire contract perk into Broken contract perk. Goblet of Fire contract perk grants legal adulthood. Harry was surprised that the contract actually connected to him and was more surprised that he was now considered a legal adult. That was something he could use. After a long pause of looking at the singed parchment, Dumbledore called out, "Harry Potter." Harry innocently asked aloud, "Yes, Headmaster." Dumbledore took a moment to collect himself before adding, "Harry Potter, come up here if you please." Harry stood up and said, Sir, if this is your idea of a joke, I think I would prefer the one about a troll, a hag, and a leprechaun who all go into a bar." A few nervous chuckles broke the silence. The headmaster gave a weak smile before continuing, "I'm afraid this is not a joke, Mr. Potter. Your name has come out of the Goblet of Fire. Please head to the room with your fellow champions." Harry let his head down in defeat and made his way up the hall. He announced aloud, "For my next funeral, I like white lilies," before joining his fellow champions in the other room. When Harry stepped through the door, all 3 champions looked at the tiny first year. Fleur Delacour said, "What is it? Do they want us back in ZE Hall?" Harry shook his head and said back, "No, you're fine, Miss Delacour. I've been chosen as a sacrificial offering to the gods, so I'll be contributing my death for the entertainment of the masses as the 4th champion." Victor Crumb paused a moment before he threw his head back and started laughing hysterically. As a sports star of Europe, he could certainly appreciate a gladiator joke, and coming from such a small student made it all the more absurd. Cedric Diggory did not laugh as he was aware of the rumors of Harry beating a troll the prior night and was surprised at the lack of denial from any of the sources. Harry himself was fit for a first year and could easily pass for a second or third year student, but Harry had clearly not even begun puberty yet, so he was still quite small to the 3 7th-year students. Cedric even heard a rumor that Harry had once declared that he would likely be forced to compete. Until now he had of course ignored that one. Victor's laughter died when Ludo Bagman entered and stated how miraculous Harry's entry as the 4th champion was. The 3 other champions looked back at Harry, who once again had his "resigned to execution" face. Not a moment later Dumbledore and the other headmasters followed by the Hogwarts staff entered the room. Everyone proceeded to argue back and forth about how unfair it was that Hogwarts had 2 contestants, completely ignoring Harry's highly likely impending death. Snape added his 2 cents, of course, "Don't go blaming Dumbledore for Potter's determination to break rules. He has been crossing lines ever since he arrived here." Harry calmly stated back, "Your confidence in my abilities is overwhelming, Professor. Remember, white lilies." That shut the man up, who was in fact finding it a bit difficult to honestly accuse a mediocre first year of cheating on such a scale. Dumbledore used the lull in the conversation to calmly ask, "Harry, did you put your name in the Goblet of Fire?" Harry shrugged, "If I wanted to commit suicide, Headmaster, I would have just asked Professor Snape. He'd probably make it painless. So no, I did not put my name in the Goblet of Fire, and I was nowhere near it today or last night." Even Snape nearly turned green a bit at the blatant accusation that he would be so willing to kill Harry. He couldn't show it, however, and remained stern-faced to the other teachers. None of the teachers could deny Harry had an alibi for the prior night, and this morning had many students keep watch on the goblet, and none saw Harry approach it. There was simply no gap he could have used to slip his name into the goblet without witnesses. Harry himself, however, wondered if his name going in the goblet and the troll getting in were coincidences. Maybe one was a distraction for the other. In which case, the likely culprit would be Quirrell. Quite thorough too, Harry had to admit. Place a troll where Harry was likely to encounter it, perhaps spell the stairs to prevent escape, and use the distraction to enter Harry's name in the goblet. Harry was kinda impressed a man with such poor acting talents could plot his murder so thoroughly. Harry was tempted to ask if he could examine the goblet so he could place it in his inventory, but Harry's energy sight along with his new insights into magic pretty much told him how the goblet worked and even what happened to it. The Goblet of Fire's creation predated the Olympics, and the torch of the Olympics was actually an imitation of the goblet. Few knew how it actually worked, but Harry could tell the goblet couldn't connect to someone who didn't have the will to compete. If Harry had never considered or at least slightly desired to be chosen, the last paper would have burned to scrap. As for how it came out, Harry figured Quirrell used the Confundus charm to make the goblet forget there were only 3 schools. Quirrell could have taken Harry's name off a piece of homework and entered it as the only name of a 4th school. Not that it mattered how it was done. As they continued to argue, Fleur Delacour asked Harry, "What are ZE white lilies for?" Harry shrugged and said, "My funeral, obviously." The French champion blanched at that and remained silent while watching the adults and her own headmistress accuse Harry of cheating. Crouch told everyone that a name that comes out of the goblet, regardless of age, would be bound in a magic contract to compete. Breaking that contract would risk Harry's magic. Once they reached the point where they realized further arguing was meaningless, they got back to explaining the first task, which was pretty much nothing. They referenced it would be based on daring, and when they entered they could only bring their wand. Harry wondered if he could transfigure a sack of goodies into a wand and bring that. They also mentioned that Harry wouldn't have to take the end-of-the-year exams, which made his grades this year completely pointless. Harry left the room alongside Cedric Diggory, who asked, "You really think you're going to die?" Harry answered back, "Most likely, but then again, it won't be the first time. We'll see what happens. Good luck." Harry split off and returned up the stairs. Paintings were gossiping with each other and a few called out to Harry, which he ignored. When he returned to the dorm, he was asked if he was really going to compete, and Harry affirmed he would. Harry then walked over to Hermione and asked, "Do you know which teacher you're going to prank yet?" She yelled, "How can you treat this as a joke?" Harry smiled back, "Don't worry too much, the only time I joked was about the white lilies. Worst case scenario, I stop holding back and win the bloody tournament." Hermione looked like she was about to argue, but she held it back for now. She was however determined to learn exactly how strong Harry was, if only for her own peace of mind. A few of the Gryffindors tried to congratulate Harry, which Harry responded to by thanking them and asking them what they would be wearing to his funeral. Harry wanted to make it clear that a first year didn't belong in the Triwizard competition. The next morning, Filch's pet cat Norris was found petrified in front of a girl's bathroom. On the wall next to the petrified cat was the message, "The Chamber of Secrets has been opened. Enemies of the air, beware," written in chicken blood. Harry's face turned pale as he remembered one of the requirements of his quest. He first thought the basilisk would be a part of the tournament. But now it seemed a creature that could kill with a look was wandering around without notice. He wasn't worried about himself. A level lost could be regained, though indescribably painful. But no one else would come back if they looked a basilisk in the eye. Harry covertly left school the following Sunday to buy several portable stereo speakers, and after some unusual arrangements he got a recording of the crowing of roosters. He didn't bother putting them in his inventory after he finished inscribing them to be mostly magic-proof, since if he encountered a basilisk he might not have time to pull them out, so he shrunk them and placed them in his pockets. Harry didn't know if the recording would actually kill a basilisk, but if nothing else it would at least drive it away, right? 2 weeks passed by without another basilisk encounter. Harry was in potions class where Snape said, "Today we will be working on antidotes. At the end of class I will poison one of you and we shall test if the antidote works properly or not. Potter, if you have anything against being poisoned, speak up now." The fact that Harry refused to speak a word in his class was at first frustrating for Snape, who would constantly try to provoke a response out of him. Now however he had changed his methods and was quite pleased with the results. Unfortunately for the poison-happy professor, the door opened at that moment and a student Harry didn't recognize said, "Please, sir, I'm supposed to take Harry Potter upstairs." Snape didn't give the student a glance and coolly said, "Potter has another hour of potions to complete, he will come upstairs when this class is finished." The student replied, "Sir, Mr. Bagman wants him, all the champions have got to go, I think they want to take photographs." Very well, Potter, leave your things here, I want you back down here later to test your antidote." The student interrupted, "Please, sir. He's got to take his things with him, all the champions dash." "Very well. Potter, take your bag and get out of my sight." Harry wordlessly got up and childishly waved goodbye to Snape, who pretended, at least Harry thought he pretended, to grind his teeth in frustration. Harry was escorted to a room where he was informed that his wand was going to be weighed and checked that it was fully functional. Harry felt this was going to become very awkward very quickly. Next, a woman wearing bright clothes and too much makeup asked for an interview and didn't give Harry time to decline. It was however amusing when she tried to drag Harry into a broom closet and Harry didn't move though he was less than half her size. Stats were funny like that. Once the woman got it through her head Harry for some reason couldn't be dragged, she decided to just interview him there. So why did you decide to enter the Triwizard Tournament? Harry realized instantly the type of interview this was going to be. Unfortunately for the reporter, she was facing the son of James Potter, who had been raised on decades, if not longer, of cable television and video games. He answered, I lost a bet with my godfather and I am a man of my word, I don't welch on my bets. How do you feel about the tournament? Terrified, I can only hope that most of my limbs remain attached and I am still alive at the end of the tournament. Where have you been for the last year? My godfather Sirius Black secretly escaped prison and rescued me from my abusive relatives. Notorious mass murderer Sirius Black. That's the one, not sure if you'll be allowed to print that though since his escape has been really hush-hush. It's thanks to him I'm not dead though. Still irresponsible of him though to make me enter my name if I lost that bet. Guess he didn't think I'd actually get chosen. Dumbledore showed up a moment later but didn't hear what they had spoken about. Seeing his approach let the reporter know the interview was over, so she promptly thanked Harry and left. Dumbledore asked, I hope you were careful, Mr. Potter. Ms. Skeeter Dash. Harry interrupted, is the type who wouldn't give the truth unless it's the juiciest piece of gossip around. I do hope she forgives my use of imagination and doesn't trust the words of an 11-year-old orphan. Dumbledore became quite confused at this but got the feeling Miss Skeeter's story would not go the way she wanted. The headmaster escorted Harry to where the other champions were sitting and over to an old, crazy-looking man. Dumbledore introduced the man as Mr. Ollivander and said, he will be checking your wands to ensure that they are in good condition before the tournament. The strange man could tell the exact details of a wand and seemed alarmingly obsessed with them. He checked over Fleur's, then Cedric's, then Crumb's, giving each a wave and casting a spell. Good, said Mr. Ollivander, handing Crumb back his wand. Which leaves Mr. Potter. Harry got to his feet and walked past Crumb to Mr. Ollivander and handed over his wand. The strange man immediately frowned upon touching the wand and said, Mr. Potter, this isn't the time for jokes, where is your wand? Harry feigned confusion and said, Mr. Ollivander, I found that in a trunk in my father's old house and have been waving it since then. Harry took the wand and made a swish and flick motion before casting the levitation charm and causing a stool to float. Dumbledore noticed this and asked, what could be the problem, Mr. Ollivander? The odd man took back Harry's wand and said, Mr. Dumbledore, this is a stick, before handing it to the headmaster. He then said, I only recently heard about Mr. Potter's return and have been waiting for him for some time, but he has yet to come in for a wand. A number of stares were exchanged and conversations exchanged below hearing level. At least Harry knew that he couldn't transfigure a sack of goodies into a wand and take it into the tasks. Obviously someone had attempted such a thing before, which was why there was a wand weighing prior to the tasks to begin with. Bagman stated that after the wand weighing, a wand could not be changed, which meant if Harry didn't have a wand now, it was against the rules for him to use one during the tasks. Dumbledore immediately offered to give Harry his own wand, but Bagman said that each champion's school could not aid them, and Dumbledore giving Harry his wand would certainly be considered aiding, meaning it was not allowed. When the other competitors heard this, each was trying to figure out where they could buy white lilies and what they would wear to the funeral. Things got a little hectic the next week when a Muggle-born student was found petrified next to an equally petrified ghost. Harry knew that had the ghost not been there, the Muggle-born student would have died. Harry couldn't gamble on other students getting lucky on their own encounter, so it was time to slay a basilisk. Some of the more ancient books he found did include the legends of the Chamber of Secrets, which seemed to be built under the Black Lake. The basilisk could likely come and go through the pipes, but Harry had no way to access them and the entrance remained mostly hidden. Okay, Harry had already seen the concentration of exotic energy coming from the sink in the bathroom next to where they found Filch's cat. He was mostly stalling since he didn't want to die of something stupid. The next Saturday Harry told Hermione and Neville he would be doing personal study for the rest of the day and headed off to the bathroom. The moderately perverted nature of the ghost who resided there did not help the atmosphere. Harry said, "Open," in Parseltongue, which caused the sink to shift and open. Harry jumped down, which led to another slide that took him below the Black Lake. Harry had the background noise meter of his settings hiked up to 10 and slowly made his way through the dust and bones. When Harry found a cast-off skin, he was more than a little surprised he could shove the whole thing into his inventory. Harry wondered how that worked. The skin and what little Harry knew of basilisks told Harry this one was likely over 1,000 years old, perhaps bred by Salazar Slytherin himself. Harry found another door that he opened with Parseltongue and entered the chamber beyond. The chamber was thankfully empty, though the magic on the giant face at the end of the room told Harry it likely opened up when addressed. In that case, Harry had time. Harry removed the half-dozen stereo speakers from his inventory and spread them around. Once finished, Harry analyzed the structure of the exotic energy and found what was basically the password. Harry shouted, "Speak to me, Salazar Slytherin, greatest of the Hogwarts Four," in Parseltongue, which engaged the face to open. Harry closed his eyes and used only his energy sense. The giant snake that came out was at least 60 feet long. Harry pressed the play button on the remote in his pocket and every speaker loudly called out the sound of crowing roosters. The snake hissed in pain but recognized Harry was the source. It smashed its head at Harry, who jumped out of the way. The basilisk opened its mouth and struck out but missed only due to disorientation. Harry recognized from the beast's energy that the sound was definitely harming it but not enough to kill it on its own. It was 1,000 years old after all. Harry conjured a spear and slashed the beast. Although basilisk hide was highly resistant to magic, it was only mostly resistant to weapon damage, and Harry's sharp spear and fast swing was enough to break the serpent's skin, causing it to cry out in pain and anger. It backed up and swung its tail at Harry, who used the spear to vault above the swung, which smashed violently into the wall. Harry conjured another spear and taunted the beast by getting closer. The basilisk was not considered the king of serpents without reason, and Harry's taunt caused the great beast to strike Harry with its fangs. Harry positioned himself and stabbed his spear through the snake's mouth. However, before it could penetrate far enough, the shaft of the spear broke and the rest of the conjured spear faded. The basilisk reared back and flailed about faster than Harry had time to dodge, sending him flying across the floor. A fourth of Harry's health vanished, which made Harry instantly regret not putting more points in his TR, since that increased his physical defense. Harry ducked another tail swipe, looking to tear his head off his shoulders, and conjured another spear. The massive snake faced Harry once more and gave a repeat performance of trying to bite him but getting stabbed in the mouth. The spear snapped again, but Harry knew it was coming this time and was able to dodge the follow-up attack. At this rate, Harry would need 5 or 6 more stabs or 1 lucky shot, but the basilisk only needed a single lucky shot. The continued blaring of crowing roosters caused the ancient creature enormous pain, which was the only reason it lacked its usual patience that made it so deadly. The longer the fight went, the more it would get used to the pain, however. But the basilisk wasn't the only one learning. Harry had never gone an entire fight relying only on his energy sense, and now he was kicking himself for it. Harry was beginning to notice that before the giant magical beast moved, the flow of exotic energy would shift around. Harry was starting to figure out how to predict the snake's movements from this alone. Mostly. He wasn't an expert in snake biology after all. Harry's next conjured spear wasn't a light one as the prior spears had been. This one was solid metal with a spear head that was thicker than normal. It was in fact too thick to pierce deeply into flesh, unless it pierced a location there was already a hole. Harry concentrated with all he could and stood before the snake. Harry bent his knee and dropped the tip of the spear, feigning weakness and injury. Though struck twice before, the basilisk's instincts couldn't stop it from striking at that moment. Harry felt the energy in the creature's muscles burst out, and in that moment Harry launched himself forward and drove the spear up. He didn't piece the exact spot of his prior 2 shots, but the roof of the beast's mouth had already been compromised, and thanks to the strength of the strike the spear successfully shattered the roof of the snake's mouth and pierced into the brain, silencing the millennial-old serpent for good. Unfortunately for Harry, his plan had a minor setback. "You have been poisoned with basilisk venom." The spear went further into the skull than Harry anticipated, nearly piercing through the other side of the head. Those fangs Harry had been so careful to stay away from using the length of his spear shaft had pierced his arm. Harry felt the poison reduce his health without signs of stopping. Soon his body's integrity would be compromised and he would dissolve into particles of magic and lose a level. It was certainly going to hurt. Suddenly a mass of exotic energy and another form of energy Harry didn't recognize flashed into existence next to him. It took the form of a thin orange and red turkey-shaped bird. A phoenix? The phoenix walked over to Harry and tilted its head over the wound and produced 3 teardrops which fell into the wound, which had yet to close. Basilisk venom neutralized. You have gained the perk poison immunity from having a neutralized form of the strongest poison running through your veins. Harry raised an eyebrow and turned to the phoenix and said, thank you." The phoenix nodded and trotted away before bursting once more into flames and leaving him alone. Once Harry was no longer dying, something rather odd happened. Harry felt the mass of dispersing exotic energy that filled the basilisk suddenly converge on him. "You have leveled up. You have gained the perk instant death immunity from absorbing the essence of a basilisk's eyes." Harry looked over the details of his new perk and wondered if this meant he could shrug off the killing curse. He could still be crushed by a boulder, but any effect that simply caused instant death wouldn't work on him anymore. That was useful. Harry thought it was quite the windfall, but he did remember that Hell mode did come with fabulous prizes. After recovering his strength, Harry got up and touched the basilisk on instinct. The entire beast was somehow dragged into his inventory, but not as a giant snake carcass. Instead of a single inventory slot showing dead basilisk, there were inventory slots filled with basilisk skin, slots filled with basilisk venom and basilisk blood somehow already in vials, and slots with basilisk meat, basilisk bones, and basilisk fangs. Harry didn't find any basilisk eyes in his inventory, but that didn't surprise him. His combat strategy revolved around leaving the eyes undamaged so he could use them later, but their essence which contained their value seemed to have been absorbed by Harry. Considering how useful that perk would be, he wasn't going to complain. Though the eyes were useless, the skin still had properties to resist exotic energy. Harry was tempted to take it somewhere to make armor, but decided against it for now. It would be better if he started on a crafter path, and once it was strong enough Harry could make something himself without wasting it. At this point Harry likely would have left if the basilisk hadn't smashed a wall revealing a secret corridor. Yup, going down there. Harry hadn't noticed the wall with energy sense, meaning the path was likely hidden through a mechanism rather than magic. Harry lit the torches in the room, which seemed to be a private study. Harry almost gleefully proceeded to loot the library into his inventory. Yup, it was Salazar's. Harry silently thanked the dead man before leaving. The morning of the first task finally came around and breakfast was filled with conversations and bets. The redhead Harry played chess with said his older brother worked with dragons and sent him a letter that 4 dragons were being sent to Hogwarts. Harry wondered how many older brothers the boy had. This did at least clue Harry in that the first task involved dragons, which gave him time to prepare a few plans. The only interesting thing to happen since Harry's basilisk encounter was the addition of the newspaper that had Harry's interview. Luckily Harry's lies had been strange enough for the woman to not change much except for some heavy exaggeration on Harry's emotional state. The entire article had been mostly about Harry as, officially at least, that was the first interview ever obtained for Harry Potter. It included details mentioned about Harry's supposed life before and hinted that Harry mentioned that his godfather was both responsible for Harry's vanishing for a year and his entry into the tournament. However, it only gave vague clues as to the identity of said godfather. It also included several paragraphs of quotes which Harry thought impressive as he only gave 4 lines of dialogue. Harry at least appreciated that those lines were in fact included. The story at least went in the direction Harry intended. It gave an outline of a young child way over his head with the weight of the wizarding world crashing down on his shoulders. When questioned about the story, Harry would laugh and tell everyone he'd never met the woman, though he appreciated her imagination. Some had doubts, but when Harry mentioned that his godfather was Sirius Black and that he was in Azkaban, no one took the article seriously anymore. Several students, especially that bleach-blonde Slytherin Snape seemed to treat as royalty, attempted to insult Harry or demean him on several encounters. Harry would simply ask if any of their parents would contribute their own funds to Harry's funeral and what they intended to wear and if they were going to get white lilies or something else. When Harry didn't bother denying that he was going to die, they didn't really have much more to work with. That and the fact that the first-year blonde, Mofo. Yeah, Mofo was squeamish, so when Harry started describing the possible gruesome ends he was likely to face with a flat, emotionless tone, the blonde would usually back away and find somewhere to heave into a bucket. Harry wondered how many purebloods would retain their sanity if forced to watch a day or 2 of television. Simpsons Treehouse of Horrors, anyone? The classes of the second half of the day had been cancelled and everyone was waiting at the Great Hall. McGonagall later showed up and said Harry was due in the stadium for the first task. Harry nodded and said to the Great Hall, "We who are about to die, salute you." Harry wondered if defeating a dragon would be easier or harder than slaying a basilisk, but since dragons weren't artificially created creatures with such bizarre weaknesses, Harry figured the dragon would be harder. Harry was taken to a tent near the stadium that had been set up over the last 3 weeks. Within the tent Harry met his 3 fellow champions and Ludo Bagman, who explained their first task was to get a golden egg and they would have to face a thing which would be decided by pulling it out of a bag. Harry went last and pulled a very small animated Hungarian horntail. Snatching an egg from a nesting dragon was not the worst-case scenario Harry had in mind, but it really wasn't that far off. It was not, however, impossible if he used a few tricks and showed off a little of his skill. Suddenly Harry had a really stupid idea which caused an unstoppable grin to appear on his face. Ping! Warning, taking items out of the inventory during a task constitutes cheating. Taking items other than a wand into the first task constitutes cheating. Cheating will cause Goblet of Fire perk to change to Broken Contract perk. It seemed the system thought his idea was no good. What about? Harry thought of a slight alteration to his really stupid idea. No warning popped up this time. The plan wasn't all that different, it just required him to use the summoning charm. It would reveal he could use a 4th-year spell, but Harry doubted that would be what people paid attention to once Harry was done. The tent itself was not monitored, so Harry snuck out and took all the items he needed out of his inventory and set them near the tent where no one would notice them. Once the time came, Harry was escorted to the entrance. The fact that the man escorting him was asking for forgiveness and pleaded with Harry not to haunt him showed how much confidence the general audience had for his chances. The open area had various levels of terrain, and just on the other side of a rock was Harry's dragon. The exotic energy Harry could sense off the thing greatly eclipsed the basilisk, which answered his question from earlier. Then again, it could have been that the basilisk was weakened after a few centuries of hibernation, so comparing the two might not be fair. In either case, Harry found a place to hide and watched the dragon through his senses. Luckily, the dragon wasn't investigating him. Harry was using the masking technique he usually used to prevent his exotic energy from destroying electronics, which basically meant his magic wasn't leaking. Harry's various libraries all told him dragons could sense magic for no other reason than the fact that dragons preferred to eat food that contained magic. The hard thing, however, was that the dragon would sense when he cast one of the only 2 spells he was going to use, as the masking technique couldn't be used while casting magic. "Accio controller," he called out. The black controller Harry set outside the tent launched off the ground and flew towards the stadium and into Harry's hand. Harry prepared himself for the dragon's inevitable attention, which never came. Harry suddenly remembered that for some reason his magic was invisible. He still didn't know why. Something to find out later. Even when Harry fully removed the masking technique, the dragon's attention didn't turn to his direction. A number of the audience was impressed that Harry used the summoning charm, but perhaps a dozen or less of the audience had any idea what he had summoned. The remote control was not a simple store-bought one, but one Harry built and designed himself using a kit. Several kits, actually. It controlled not 1, but 7 different heavy-duty electric helicopters. The remote was half the size of a keyboard and twice as thick. It had 5 different joysticks, 3 knobs, 5 switches, and 5 buttons. Even a Muggleborn would likely have no idea how to use it, but it was ideal for the mayhem Harry was about to bring. For a few minutes nothing happened. The dragon's chain was long enough for it to reach half the arena near the eggs, but unless attracted elsewhere it wouldn't leave the area close to the nest. Suddenly a whirring sound approached and 6 different dog-sized RC helicopters flew into the arena. Each had 2 shopping bag-sized sacks strapped to them. A 7th helicopter flew over from a different side of the stadium. This was Harry's special one, which was only cat-sized and ran silent. None of them had more than a single spell's worth of magic, so though the dragon heard them approach, wasn't too interested in them. The 7th one came to Harry, who cast his 2nd spell on a sponge tied to a long string to the helicopter. The sticking spell. Harry piloted it back into the air and had the other 6 approach the dragon in formation from a few different directions. The dragon was getting annoyed and breathed fire at one, which promptly exploded with a loud bang. That got the dragon's attention. Though it was just the flour Harry stuffed in the sacks that flash fired, it made the dragon classify the flying objects as things which couldn't get close to its nest. The helicopter's smooth hovering ended at that point and they started moving around very fast left and right. One flew right at the egg batch, which earned the dragon's fury. The Hungarian horntail was not known as one of the nastiest dragons around without reason. The dragon swung its tail at the chopper, but the mechanical toy swerved in a spiral and dodged the strike. The dragon's ire had reached its limit and it jumped at the helicopter and crushed it with its jaws. The 4 remaining helicopters the dragon could see were flying around and 2 charged at the dragon, thus challenging its authority. The dragon leapt away from the nest to destroy the remaining helicopters, giving Harry the chance he needed now that its attention was away from the eggs. While simultaneously flying his 4 distractions around the arena, Harry flew the silent chopper above the nest and carefully lowered the sponge with the sticking charm on a string down. The area of the nest was enclosed, so Harry didn't have to deal with any wind, so it was basically a very complicated and moderately dead claw game. The sponge landed on the golden egg and Harry rose the helicopter into the air, lifting the egg with it, causing Harry to silently thank the heavens the egg didn't seem to be that heavy. The reason Harry was able to aim so well was his liberal use of pausing. He'd pause, walk over as close to the egg group as he could and check the accuracy of the sponge before unpausing and making an adjustment. The silent chopper delivered the egg to Harry, who took the lighter than he thought egg off the sponge and flew the very expensive toy back into the air. Harry then flew all the remaining helicopters at the dragon in a group and charged them forward to their doom. Seeing the whole flock line up, the dragon let loose a storm of flame, turning the entire group into ashes with an impressive explosion. Harry quietly took the egg and his controller and returned to the exit. Each of those toys cost several £100, but it was certainly worth it. The man at the gate saw Harry with the egg and looked like he'd swallowed a fly. Harry figured the man didn't expect to see Harry return. Harry had to clear his throat to get the stunned man to register that he was supposed to open the gate and let Harry out of the arena. The announcer eventually realized the golden egg was missing from the nest, and when he called it out, the audience exploded into a frenzy. Very few people appreciated what Harry had done, and plenty of them had no idea he used Muggle toys to do it. A minute or so later, McGonagall showed up, only now noticing Harry had already left and gotten his egg. "Mr. Potter, are you all right? What were those things?" She was more than a little relieved that not only was Harry not dead, he didn't have a single injury despite getting the most vicious dragon. Harry pointed at his controller and said, "I've spent the last few weeks practicing the summoning charm and summoned this Muggle toy." He showed the controller that was able to use Muggle means to control the other flying Muggle toys. "Wouldn't that be against the rules?" she asked worriedly. If Harry cheated, he would face the consequences. Harry shook his head and said, "Nope, the rules said I can't bring anything but a wand into the task. There is no rule against summoning outside tools and using things outside the arena." Harry used a levitation charm at a nearby chair to pick it up and set it down to prove his magic wasn't affected. Mr. Bagman showed up a moment later and repeated McGonagall's question, "Mr. Potter, can I ask what you did? I seem to have missed it." Harry explained once more, "I used magic to summon some complicated Muggle toys and used them to distract the dragon while I used another Muggle toy to retrieve the egg. I still have my magic, so none of that was against the rules." The head of the Department of Magical Games and Sports looked intrigued. "Those were Muggle toys? Fascinating. I've heard rumors that the Muggles had some rather sophisticated toys, but I've never seen one work before." Harry nodded and said, "You wouldn't. Magic makes Muggle toys break or act weird. I made those toys myself so they could work around magic." This was true. In order to finally get his crafter path rank, Harry had to make something, but he couldn't just buy and assemble from a kit. Sure, he did that at first, but since it didn't work, he had to spend almost a whole weekend using the parts from several kits and some extras to assemble his remote control. He also had to use a computer to write his own software for the helicopters. There was no actual way a single controller could manually operate a half-dozen helicopters perfectly, so he actually wrote 20 or so different programs onto his controller that would do most of the detailed stuff on its own. Bagman looked impressed and said, "You controlled them, yes? Why did you fly them at the dragon in the end?" "Because I challenged a dragon, and if they left, the dragon would remain angry and would be harder to handle later." Bagman hadn't considered this, but it was true all the same. The Hungarian horntail seemed quite pleased with itself after destroying the toys, and for such an aggressive dragon, it had been nowhere near as riled up as the other contestants left their dragons at the end of their tasks. Of course, the actual reason was that Harry didn't want the rune schemes he set into the choppers to be examined by others. The helicopters were a loss to be sure, but 95% of the work Harry had put into this project had gone into the controller. The helicopter drones were just assembled and engraved. The controller, on the other hand, was where he put the real work into. After a few more clarifying questions, the man left Harry to return to the judges' panel. Sure, Harry hadn't used magic beyond the summoning charm, and the use of Muggle toys did go against the spirit of the tournament if not the letter. But on the other hand, Harry was 11 years old and had been set against a dragon. The head of the Department of Magical Games and Sports had in fact assembled 20 Dragon Wranglers on standby once Harry had been incapacitated to save his life if possible, which, as long as he was unable to continue, was not against the rules, though he would of course not be scored well and wouldn't get the clue for the next task. Harry was quickly accosted by the school nurse, who for the third time this year checked him over to find no injuries. The nurse was more than a little skeptical at this first year's level of being danger-prone, yet after falling from a broom, defeating a troll, and stealing an egg from a nesting dragon, he still didn't have a single injury. He returned to the tent from before, where he had to await the judges' scoring, and was met with the disbelieving eyes of the other 3 contestants, all of which were injured or had damaged clothes except for him. Harry didn't see what they did, but since Harry was last, they all saw what he did. Cedric shook his head and said, "I don't know whether to be impressed or ashamed, Potter. Harry cocked an eyebrow and Fleur answered the unasked question in a French accent. Mr. Diggory transfigured a stone into a dog for a distraction, but Z.E. Dragon lost interest and shot fire at him. Harry did notice the orange burn paste over his fellow student's face but was polite enough not to stare. Fleur's dress also appeared quite singed. Crumb said, "The seventh flyer vast silent and your dragon didn't notice it. Even I only noticed because I am seeker and I saw it carry egg on string. Why was it silent but not the rest?" Harry wasn't surprised someone spotted the last one, it wasn't like he made it invisible or anything. That was another project altogether. He thought of the best way to answer someone who likely didn't know any Muggle terms, but as the man was a seeker, he likely knew a lot about brooms. Harry said, "The last one was a different model. It could not go as fast or as far, but it could go quietly." They asked a few more questions and exchanged stories. Fleur, it seemed, used a powerful spell to put her dragon to sleep. It mostly worked, save the dragon's flaming snore singed her dress. Crumb actually fired a spell at the dragon's eye to blind it, but the dragon crushed some of its eggs in the confusion. That would have worried Harry had he not felt that the eggs were all fake. How they convinced a dragon to guard a nest of fake eggs though he didn't know. The scoring came out with Cedric in first place with 44 points, Crumb in second place with 40, and Fleur with 39. Harry was in last place with 30 because Crumb's headmaster gave him 0 points while Crouch and Fleur's headmistress gave him 6 apiece. Dumbledore gave him 8 and Bagman gave him 10. Harry wondered if Bagman had bet on Harry's victory. The moment Harry left the tent, Hermione ran past Neville and straight for him before almost shouting, "Why didn't you tell me you were going to use RC helicopters? I thought my hair would turn grey watching the other students face those dragons worrying about you." Harry smiled at his friend's concern and easily admitted, "I came up with the idea at the last minute, so even I didn't know. It was only when they told us we had to retrieve an egg did I come up with that idea." Hermione shook her head for a moment to get her bearings before asking, "How did you get Muggle electronics to work here?" "I brought a calculator which didn't even turn on when I took it out of my bag on our first day. A side project I've been working on. Didn't think it'd be that useful. Wonder if I can do the same for the next 2 tasks." Neville chipped in his 2 cents, "Not a bad idea. You were the only one who didn't get hurt, so a repeat performance or 2 wouldn't be bad. You won't get the highest score and you won't win the tournament, but you'll survive." Hermione only took a moment to consider this before saying, "He's right, survival is the most important." Harry noticed a magical being approaching and turned to see Rita Skeeter show up with a predatory smile. "Congratulations, Harry," she said, beaming at him. "I wonder if you could give me a quick word. How did you feel facing that dragon? How do you feel now, about the fairness of the scoring?" Harry paused for a few minutes to consider the best way to address the witch. After coming up with the craziest believable story he could, he unpaused and said, "Of course I don't mind Miss Skeeter. I almost couldn't breathe when I saw that dragon. Everyone kept telling me before entering how it was the biggest, meanest, nastiest one, so I was terrified. I don't know how fair the scoring was, but other than Mr. Bagman and Headmaster Dumbledore, I don't think the others had any idea what I actually did or how impressive it was, so they scored on their ignorance." Skeeter took a look at her quick quill notes to confirm the exaggerations they jotted down at least had the pertinent details. She continued, "About that, why did you use Muggle toys in a wizard tournament and why do you think that was impressive?" Harry figured the woman wanted to write down that Harry was looking down on the tournament and that he was spitting in the face of tradition and yada yada. Nothing Harry said or didn't say would stop her from writing that, but Harry could redirect who she said that about. Harry said, "It was actually my godfather's idea. He's a terrible prankster and told me I had to use Muggle toys for the competition. I told him it was impossible, but he told me to find a way. The reason it was impressive is because no one has ever applied wizard magic to fancy Muggle toys before. No one. I'm the first. It wasn't cheating either. A sword is a Muggle toy, but if you cast magic on it, it is a magic tool. Those toys were the same. If they weren't, I couldn't have used them since everyone knows Muggle toys don't work around magic." A small group of teachers was heading towards them, so Skeeter thanked Harry and parted. Hermione used the moment before the teachers got there and said, "You did tell that woman those lies about Sirius Black?" Harry said, "Yup." At this point Neville had to fight to hold back his laughter. Professor McGonagall saw Harry and said, "The headmaster would like to have a word with you, Mr. Potter." Harry nodded and followed her. He had been wondering when this would happen. The silent awkwardness of the walk back to the castle was broken when the professor said, "I'm pleased to see you made it out in one piece considering how little confidence you showed earlier." Harry shrugged, if I told anyone I wasn't going to die they'd call me a liar, a fool, or accuse me of being in denial. I was just saving myself from being insulted until after I survived my imminent death. McGonagall didn't really have a response to that, so the silence resumed until they had entered the castle and made their way up to the headmaster's office. The ancient wizard noticed their arrival and said, "Thank you, Minerva, you can return. Mr. Potter, please sit." Harry sat on the chair before the man's desk and for a moment neither said a word. Dumbledore broke the silence first. "This would be our first meeting, yet up until now I've done so much damage to your life, Harry, and I cannot ask you to forgive me. I tried to correct my mistakes, I wanted to keep my distance, allow you to live your own life, but it seems such is more difficult than I first had hoped." Harry resisted the urge to roll his eyes at the obviousness of that last part. But it did answer Harry's questions. The man did, and rightly so, consider himself responsible for Harry's death. Dumbledore moved to open a drawer and took out a silver cloth and a wand. He said, "This is, or was, a cloak of invisibility that belonged to your father. And this was the Elder Wand. 2 of the 3 Deathly Hallows of Legends." Harry quickly went over the tale of the 3 brothers. A copy of The Beetle and the Bard was in the Potter library. His father did in fact tell Harry about his family cloak, but for some reason never mentioned its location, as if he didn't intend for Harry to get it. Harry decided to ask the question the headmaster was waiting for. Was? "Yes, Harry. On that terrible night last year, this wand lost its power and this cloak no longer rendered its wearer invisible. The 3rd Hallow, the one said to be capable of bringing those from the other side back to this realm, I suspect has also lost its power. And I have my suspicions why." Harry was certainly interested in this, so he waited for the old man to continue. The headmaster said, "Harry, when you summoned your Muggle invention, I nearly cried out in terror and could only wait until the dragon noticed where you were. But it didn't. It wasn't until that moment that I noticed that your magic appears to be invisible to the senses of others. And then there is the fact that it is so simple for you to cast magic, powerful magic I suspect, without a wand. And of course there is your remarkable return from the other side. Invisible magic, magic that can be cast without a wand, and the gift of returning from the other side. You see where I am going with this, Harry?" Harry was curious to know where Dumbledore's certainty that Harry had died was coming from, but Harry supposed the man may have had his ways, which was why he knew that Harry had died, which meant Harry had returned from death. As for the implications, it was certainly interesting. The power of the Deathly Hallows had vanished when Harry died and seemed to become a part of him. Invisible magic? It could still damage electronics, which meant that his magic would still affect things, but it just couldn't be sensed actively or directly. Indirectly, however, it could be. Something to consider. It certainly explained why he didn't need a wand. Harry asked, "So what now?" Dumbledore shook his head. "I would be willing to personally teach you if not for the Goblet of Fire. It would take my magic if I tried to tutor you this year, something I would not regret if I could help you, but I am far too old and would not last long enough without magic to teach you much if I tried." Harry thought on it for a moment and asked, "Can I borrow your library for a week?" Dumbledore's brows rose on that statement and considered it. However, a moment later he let a small frown followed by an amused smirk. He said, "As it is my personal library, granting my permission to loan any book would constitute assistance and risk my magic. Therefore if you ask," he said, emphasizing the word, "I cannot allow it. Now if you excuse me, I have to meet with some of my fellow headmasters." Dumbledore twirled his wand and cast a petrification charm on the portraits in the room. He then got up and said, "You may rest here as long as you wish, and on an unrelated note, if you come across any book of my private collection around the castle, please hand them to Professor McGonagall when you can and she will ensure I get them back. My memory is not what it used to be and I don't recall if they have gone missing or not, so do keep a lookout for them in case they have." A moment later and Harry was alone in the headmaster's office. Harry decided not to look a gift horse in the mouth and proceeded to nab every book from the headmaster's shelf. Stealing certainly didn't qualify as assistance rendered. Once his inventory was stocked, Harry returned down to his dorms where there had been a party waiting for him, congratulating him on not dying. As he had the lowest score, Harry figured that was just about the best thing they could think of congratulating him on. The nameless redhead handed Harry the golden egg he had forgotten at the tent, and Harry decided it would be best not to question why the redhead had it. Time to see what the clue for the next stage was. A week after the first task brought forth 3 problems of different types, but unignorable all the same. The first was that there was a Christmas ball and which Harry had to attend. He asked Hermione as the only girl of his age he knew well, and after flustering for a few minutes with some excuses which ended in Harry promising to get her address, she accepted. She was going home for the holidays, but Harry, begging on his knees and promising bribes of her choice of books for Christmas presents, had successfully convinced her. The second, and slightly larger problem was the details of the second task. The egg once opened had a recording of a shrieking sound. According to a few books Harry knew, the only species that sounded like that were banshees and mermaids above water. Once submerged, the clue became audible and Harry figured he would be given an hour to find something, or someone, taken and placed in the Black Lake. Hermione and Neville both blanched at the idea and said they didn't want to be hostages, even fake ones. The third, and comparatively largest problem was the issue of the unidentified animagus hiding in the dorm. The youngest redhead brought out his rat and Harry saw it for the first time that year during the party. The exotic energy it contained was certainly that of a wizard. Harry hadn't noticed it before because it was such a weak wizard he thought it was one of his classmates of his year. If it was anything else, this problem would not rank higher than the other two, but Harry's father told him that Peter Pettigrew, the man who actually sold him out to Voldemort, was a rat animagus. The fact that the redhead's pet was missing a toe sealed the deal. All three problems required a large amount of preparation. Harry would have to ask McGonagall for permission to head to Hogsmeade with Hermione as he heard there was an excellent tailor there, but no one below third year was usually allowed to go. As for the second task, Harry decided to continue the theme of Muggle toys. He first considered submersible drones, but the drones wouldn't be able to do much even if they found a person. Harry decided to go for broke and just get a personal submersible vehicle for himself and outfit it with extras. However, likely to prevent cheating or exploration prior to the event, Harry figured some time before the second task, the Black Lake would be closed off. The task was in February, so just to be safe, Harry would have to acquire and outfit a sub, then transport it secretly to the Black Lake in a place it could be hidden, all before January. The last problem was the most delicate. Harry discreetly borrowed an owl and sent a letter to his Gringotts account manager that Peter Pettigrew had been found alive and asked for arrangements to be made for the freeing of his godfather. He already received a reply instructing him to capture the rat in a week and to get Amelia Bones involved as Sirius was her betrothed. And now Harry found himself in front of the star of Hufflepuff, Cedric Diggory, and asking, "Would you be able to get Susan Bones? There is a matter I need to speak with her about." Cedric thought on it for a moment before answering back, sure. "Oh yeah, have you figured out the clue yet?" "Yeah, it's Mermish. Open the egg underwater. Basically someone we each care about will be taken as a fake hostage and thrown into the Black Lake and we'll have an hour to rescue them. My Muggle toys don't do underwater so I'm still thinking up ideas." Diggory was more than a little surprised Harry not only easily figured it out, but was willing to give the summary to him. He'd check it out himself of course, but having 3 full months to prepare certainly helped him. A few minutes later Susan Bones, a short but cute redhead, came out of the dorms. "You wanted to see me, Potter?" Harry nodded and said, "This is going to get very complicated so don't jump to conclusions before I'm finished. First, what do you know of your aunt's relationship with Sirius Black?" She looked offended for more than just a moment but held her tongue about why Harry was asking such a personal question for now. "She doesn't speak of him much, but what happened really hurt her." Harry nodded. "From what I've seen of the arrest records, Sirius literally shouted, 'I killed Lily and James,' to the sky, which seemed to be enough for everyone to simply skip giving him a trial and he was sent directly to Azkaban." Susan nodded. More than a few knew that Sirius never had a trial, but there were over a dozen Aurors cited as witnesses to his confession, so it didn't seem to matter back then. Harry continued, "The reason he said that was because it was his idea to change the secret keeper from himself to Peter Pettigrew. Turns out Peter was the traitor, and if Sirius hadn't suggested the swap, my parents might still be alive." Susan scowled at Harry because it was far more likely this was a cruel prank at her aunt than it was the truth. Harry noticed this and said, "I wouldn't bring this up if I didn't have evidence. Pettigrew is alive, and I know where he is." Her scowl lessened to a degree before she asked, "And what do you want me to do?" "Contact your aunt and bring her here without raising alarms. Once here, I swear I will bring her directly to Pettigrew. I don't know if he will be armed or not, but he won't be expecting to get caught." There were of course several ways to contact Amelia Bones, the head of the Department of Magical Law Enforcement, without going through her niece. But they were all about as subtle as calling a fire truck by pulling the fire alarm. Susan asked a few more questions and Harry answered what he could. She said she would send her aunt a letter and bring her here in an hour. Harry had chosen Saturday for this plan simply because the redhead with the pet rat usually spent it playing games with their other roommates and the rat seemed to be caged up during this time. Harry stayed in the Great Hall with a book on runes laid out at the Gryffindor table while Susan waited at the other table. An hour passed and the doors of the Great Hall opened to reveal a slender red-headed woman wearing an Auror's uniform flanked by two others wearing the same uniform. Harry walked right up to her and introduced him, "Miss Bones, thank you for coming, I'm Harry Potter." The woman's passive face arched an eyebrow. The Daily Prophet articles recently were most confusing as they claimed Sirius Black had secretly escaped and was responsible for Harry's vanishing act a year prior while everyone thought he was dead. The post-first task article also claimed it was Black's idea to use Muggle toys to complete the task. Amelia was uncomfortable reading those articles as she knew they could not be true and also knew that Sirius would have enjoyed reading them himself. That last realization truly hurt. The head of the DMLE said, "I do hope you understand the severity of your claim, Mr. Potter. One way or another I will be taking someone to my holding cells today, and if a word of what my niece has written is untrue, I can promise that someone will be you." Both Aurors flanking Madame Bones flinched at her scowl, which wasn't even directly at them. Harry remained unfazed, which Miss Bones noticed either meant he was a very good liar, or perhaps. Harry said, "I understand, Miss Bones. Please follow me and I'll explain on the way." Harry led the group up to the Gryffindor Tower with Susan and a few others in tow, wondering what was going on. Harry explained aloud for everyone along the way, "According to a letter I found, Peter Pettigrew was the secret keeper. It was Sirius's idea. A giant prank on you-know-who and the Death Eaters. If a secret keeper is killed, those who were given the secret become secret keepers themselves. Sirius knew he would die before giving up his friends' lives, so he told everyone he was the secret keeper so that he would be targeted, and if he actually did die, others who knew the secret and were more inclined to share it wouldn't be able to." Harry didn't see it, but Amelia's face frowned in realization and a little bit of shame. It was exactly something Sirius would do, and if the secret was only given by parchment, no one would know who the actual secret keeper was. One of the Aurors spoke up, but he confessed. Amelia answered back, if it was Sirius's idea to use Peter, he would have felt responsible for their deaths regardless. Something that would have become known had he been given a trial. She said that last part with more edge than she intended. The other Auror said, "But those Muggles he killed." Harry said, if Peter survived, then the question of who actually killed those Muggles is no longer certain. By this time they had reached the fat lady's portrait and Harry said, "Balderdash." The fat lady looked questioningly at the guests, but as they had Auror robes, she did not hesitate to open up. Before the group could enter the common room, Harry said, "Wait here a moment." He then walked up to the redhead playing chess and said, "Would you mind bringing your rat in his cage? I saw something unusual about him. He might be special." The redhead looked confused for a moment and said, "Scabbers? Special? Not that dingy old rat. How old exactly is that rat?" The redhead looked pensive for a moment and answered back, 10 years I think." Harry smiled back and said, "Rats normally die of old age after 2 years. Can you please fetch him?" The redhead looked more confused but said, "All right," before heading off to his room. Amelia and the others heard the conversation and Harry motioned for them to enter. Harry said, "The only thing they found of Peter was a toe, and according to the letter my mum wrote, Peter was an unregistered ratanimagus. The rat he's bringing is missing a toe on its front paw, and as you heard, it has been with his family for 10 years. A moment later the redhead brought the cage containing Scabbers and Amelia quickly took it from him. When she looked at the rat within, it looked back at her and backed into a corner. She gave a cruel smile at this and directly reached into the cage and grabbed the rat. She let the cage fall with her other hand before grabbing her wand and tapped the rat. A moment later the rat enlarged into a grotesque fat man. The cruel smile deepened as she practically sneered, "Hello Peter." Before the man could even whimper, a stunner was sent by another Auror. Harry quickly thought of something and said, "If you take him back to the Ministry, galleons will likely be used to delay his questioning before removing the source, just like they were to keep my godfather from a trial. Would it be possible to question him in an unused classroom before taking him away?" Madame Bones considered it and was disappointed to admit Harry wasn't wrong. Although not compliant with regulations, she wasn't going to let Sirius stay in Azkaban for another moment if she could. Another Auror said, "I did bring Veritaserum. A witness would be required, but if we call McGonagall and Dumbledore, they'd fit the bill I'd think." Amelia said, "I do believe Dumbledore has a flu in his office. Using it to leave but doing a few things with the headmaster as witness before we head out would not be unacceptable." The Aurors left with Peter floated out with magic and the common room remained silent for only a moment before bursting into questions. Harry did the best he could to answer and promised the redhead he would replace his pet. The events that followed were somewhat summarized by the Daily Prophet. posthumously awarded Order of Merlin third-class winner found alive as a marked Death Eater. The testimony given under Veritaserum proved he killed those 13 muggles and framed Sirius Black, who was never the secret keeper to begin with. He was the one who led Voldemort to Godric's Hollow that night and ran away when his master was vanquished. Harry's concern about Pettigrew, however, proved accurate when the rat reportedly escaped custody with help from an unknown assailant. Luckily, the earlier testimony was enough to warrant the trial of Sirius Black, who was found innocent of all charges and admitted into St. Mungo's Wizard Hospital for care. As if trying to make up for the blunder of imprisoning an innocent man and allowing the guilty party to go free, the Minister of Magic in his great wisdom thought to assign 100 Dementors to guard the school in the case of Pettigrew's return. Harry was conflicted over that last part. His quest very clearly said to master the Patronus charm, which he did a week into the first year, but would that have been needed if Harry hadn't captured Pettigrew? He thought the quest wasn't a self-fulfilling prophecy. Then again, perhaps he would have needed it anyways. He still hadn't defeated Voldemort, and it was said the man could control the blasted things. Of the quest requirements he had for the year, mastering the Patronus charm and defeating the Basilisk were the only two things he had completed. He still didn't know anything about the Philosopher's Stone he was supposed to protect. Sure, academically he knew it apparently could turn base metals into gold and produce an elixir that would heal any wound and stop a person from aging for a time. He also understood in all likelihood Voldemort wanted it and Harry had to stop him from getting it. But how? Harry had no idea where the thing was. If he were Dumbledore or Nicholas Flamel, he'd give it to someone and ask them to hide it, obliviate that person of the knowledge they had of it, then when the time was needed he could ask them where they would hide it if they did have it. Using that method, Dumbledore could even have told Hagrid to hide it in the Forbidden Forest and obliviated the knowledge of doing so from Hagrid. There were too many perfectly undefeatable ways to protect something using magic, and if Dumbledore hid it, there should be no way for anyone to find it, right? Of course, this was under the assumption that Dumbledore was competent. Harry's stomach felt cold when he thought that his assumption relied on this for some reason. At the moment what he knew was that Quirrell wanted him dead and likely entered Harry in the tournament. However, Harry had no proof one way or another that Quirrell was connected to Voldemort or not. He knew someone opened the Chamber of Secrets, and although Harry took care of the Basilisk, the culprit remained unknown. Harry kinda hoped that was Quirrell as well, but he couldn't rush to judgment. Worst case scenario, Harry would have to fight Voldemort, Quirrell, whoever released the Basilisk, an army of Dementors, all of Voldemort's Death Eaters, and Peter Pettigrew all at once. Oh, and if any of them got the Philosopher's Stone, Voldemort might end up immortal. And Harry had a ball to attend, a submarine to build, and training to do. At this point Harry was tempted to ask a teacher for a time turner, but that would constitute assisting a student with the tournament, so they couldn't do it. Harry wondered at this point if faking his death, again, would be easier than Hell Mode. Harry already found the part of the settings that would turn things into ranked dungeons, and Harry turned it off forever. Even if there were fabulous prizes at the end, Harry didn't want to have to go through something like this again, ever. Harry decided for the final boss he would cheat as much as possible. Like stocking up on one-use overpowered items and filling his inventory with them. Harry had to create them, but he was coming along. He was tempted to buy a gun or a pile of grenades, but unless he built them from scratch himself, the exotic energy he released would change the physics of them and likely prevent them from working, or worse, would make them go off prematurely. It was a little-known fact that magic shields didn't protect against bullets. Most magic shields were designed to block magic. There are in fact spells that repel or block arrows, but the force of a bullet was 20 to 70 times more condensed than a primitive arrow, and Harry hadn't found a single spell he felt capable of stopping one. In order to have a magic-proof gun though, Harry would have to inscribe the bullet, the shell, and every single individual part of the gun. He would also have to make and press his own ammo for that to work. He couldn't buy his own. Thanks to that, he couldn't simply whip a gun out of his inventory and pop Voldemort between the eyes. Well, he could, if he suppressed his own exotic energy to the level of a non-magical. But then obviously he couldn't use magic. Perhaps as a plan M. Harry also had that treasure trove of nice things he looted from Salazar's study. Going over those tomes on Parcel magic runes made Harry feel like Christmas had come early. There was also a large amount of very nice ritual magic and blood magic tomes. Harry was sure whoever controlled the Basilisk didn't know of that room, or those books would have been taken long ago. The problem, oddly enough, was that very few of those nice things, even the blood magic, were of any use to Harry at the moment. Since Harry's blood turned back into magic particles and faded away a few minutes after leaving his body, any blood magic Harry performed would not last longer than a few minutes. This did, however, provide some opportunities. Blood magic, even using your own, was illegal in Britain with very few exceptions. But if he didn't need the effect to last long, Harry could potentially perform blood magic and later there would be no evidence. This meant although Harry couldn't use any of the really powerful blood magics with long-term effects, he could use short-term effect ones like those that boost magic and such free of risk. The parcel runes were more useful for Harry's hobbies and he already incorporated them into his magic-resistant rune scheme to place on electronics. It was thanks to that his helicopters could even fly in proximity to a dragon without getting fried, as dragons practically emit a medium-level spell's worth of exotic energy just from breathing. Harry really wanted a magic-proof rune scheme, but even months of pause times turned up no way to create one with just what he had. Harry however didn't let all his worries get him down, not today, for today was a very special day. It was the last class of the last day before the winter break and it was also potions class with Snape. Hermione fidgeted every so often at the beginning of class, but luckily the potions professor's attention was on Harry, so he missed the signs of nervousness. The professor had placed his cauldron on the fire a few minutes ago and was currently berating everyone except Draco for not being perfect, even making up things to accuse people of as he pleased. "Potter, your ingredients look like they were sliced by a blind drunk." He pointed his wand at Harry's ingredients and cast an incendio charm, burning them all to a crisp. 5 points from Gryffindor for wasting ingredients. You'll receive a 0 for the day. Suddenly Snape heard a sound that was forbidden in his classroom. A snicker. He turned to face the sound but found not one, but several people seemingly trying to hold back their laughter. He sneered and said, "What could possibly be so amusing?" One of the slightly braver Slytherins pointed at Snape's cauldron. Snape turned and saw that his cauldron bore several words that glowed in bright pink letters. "Snape treats me horribly, no wonder he doesn't have a girlfriend." Snape quickly pointed his wand at the letters and cast a quick cancellation spell at the letters, but it did nothing. He then used a cauldron cleaning spell, but that too had no effect. The snickering got louder. He turned to Harry of course, but the boy didn't even look up. Harry was staring at his book through his perpetually broken glasses, which he still wore to every one of Snape's classes. The fact that he still turned in good work when Snape didn't sabotage him remained one of the great mysteries of Hogwarts. Snape of course played his part and deducted further points from Harry. His only evidence that Harry did it was his lack of a denial when asked. Of course everyone knew Harry didn't speak in that class, so everyone saw it as a low blow. After class, Harry got the message he was looking for. Ping. Quest complete, Heir of the Marauders, reward, Animagus perk. Harry smiled inwardly. Quest rewards really were quite good. Neville had already turned to Hermione and asked, "How'd you do it, Hermione?" She looked abashed and said, "I used a solvent and chemical that stained his cauldron." The chemicals the stain was made up glowed pink in the presence of pewter at a certain temperature. It wasn't a magic reaction, so he couldn't cancel it. And since it was an active chemical reaction, his cleaning spell wouldn't work unless he used it for a few minutes. Harry put his arm around Hermione and said, "You pranked a teacher, I'm so proud of you." She looked sideways and removed Harry's arm. "I did lose the bet." The twins somehow heard about the prank and congratulated Hermione on it after questioning her thoroughly on how she did it. Seems they intended on starting up a joke shop and she'd given them a number of ideas. Oddly enough, Hermione really clicked with the pair as they were both brilliant and knew lots of Muggle chemistry along with charms and potions along with their applications. Hermione actually got the idea for the prank during one of Harry's lessons with her. His scholar rank progressed not just when teaching magic, but any subject. Harry abused this of course and brought Hermione's mundane studies up with every week, and at the moment she was at freshman level high school in chemistry, algebra, biology, and physical sciences like basic physics and geology. Harry was hoping that teaching her enough to get her accredited for a GED by the summer would be enough to get his scholar rank to 21. She could then start college-level material, and by the time she finished Hogwarts, she'd be able to get into any university and do whatever she wanted. She was Harry's first student and he had already become quite invested in her future, so he wanted her to be the best she could be. After getting Hermione a dress on the first day of the winter break, Harry snuck out of Hogwarts and headed to Gringotts to get more British pounds and eventually bought a personal sub about the size of a motorcycle and a large amount of extras. Harry invited Hermione to carve the magic resistance runes into the submarine parts, which she accepted as long as Harry answered her questions. "I understand how the runes work together, but why does this prevent magic from destroying it?" "I mean, we're using magic to make the runes, aren't we?" Harry considered the best way to translate how it worked and answered back, "Imagine that magic is like water and that electronics don't like water. This castle would be raining all day every day and us students are worse than sprinklers when we use magic. Hermione nodded and Harry continued, this rune scheme uses magic to hold back magic. It is basically like covering the electronics in a layer of water then freezing the water into ice. The ice surrounds the electronics, preventing more water from getting in, and the ice itself doesn't penetrate the electronics so they still work because they're not technically wet. It was actually more complicated than that, as the volume the runes prevented the magic from penetrating was not so easily described. However, as long as Hermione practiced, she could use these rune schemes in the future herself to prevent electronics from frying around her. Harry already showed her how to suppress her magic like a muggle so she wouldn't be trapped in the magic world like other muggleborns. The Yule Ball came and went without fuss. Hermione looked as stunning as a 12-year-old in a dress could be, and Harry looked nice in a tuxedo as well. Hermione enjoyed counting off each person she caught staring at Harry aloud just to mess with him and break the tension. Before the last day of 2004, the parts of the sub had been inscribed and reassembled. The fully assembled sub could actually be shrunken and re-enlarged without breaking, something he only was able to do with the stereos before. It allowed Harry to bring it to Hogwarts in his inventory and place it in the Black Lake. The sub had a remote control which Harry used to sink it down and partially bury it. He could remotely set it to come up when he needed it, so he set a timer that would automatically bring it to the surface of the lake near the shore at 11:01 a.m. on February 24th, a minute after the first task was set to begin. If you like this content, don't forget to like and subscribe. See you later, bye bye.